Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension. Self.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Hello, hello, hello. You're listening to a podcast not only of sound, but also of mind. It's Time to Rewind is a podcast that takes a journey into a wondrous land of time loops whose boundaries are that of imagination. Each episode, my guest and I explore these time loops one loop at a time. This stop is Trapped in the Twilight Zone, and this is the fourth and final stop at 1985's Season 1, Episode 23's first segment, Shadow Play. Here with me for the last time is Austin Pryor from Malkovich Malkovich Minute Minute. How are you doing today?
Doing good. The last time, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. I know where I'm not one. I'll never be back on. Okay.
At the very least, the last time this season. And,
Cool.
just like in the last one, we were talking about basically the last 2 minutes of the 1985 episode that has the repetition of the courtroom scene with all the roles shifted around. And this time I did notice one extra role that I didn't mention in the Alice Lauren episode, which I'm surprised that I didn't notice because he really looks out of place. But at the same time, I think that they give him glasses and in him wearing a suit because the district attorney in this one was actually the mean prison guard.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting choice, and I feel like he really does look out of place because he looks like a mean the actor, I think, looks like he's more fitting as a mean prison guard rather than as a professional district attorney. And then just quickly going through the other roles, his jailmate across the hall is now his defense lawyer. The defense lawyer is now the judge, and his father, who played the priest, is now the jury foreman.
Yeah, which is very, very apt. And again, the 85 version is a bit better at pinning a meaning to some of these swapping faces and changes and stuff, So the dad was the priest, was the father, was the figure that gives counsel or, is but it's also an authority figure. And, and now the father is giving the judgment, is passing judgment. And I'm sure if we looked at other loops of this guy's nightmare, we would see the father as the judge, or even one of the executioners, So I'm sure the dad kind of jumps around this thing.
Yeah, and actually, I think it is a good point to talk about the shifting of the roles and how they connect, because I think it is interesting that, especially in this one, that there is that connection between the characters' two different roles, because we have his jailmate across the hall who is very sympathetic to him as a character over the course of the episode, and now he's his defense lawyer. So he's
Yes.
still basically on the same side. He's still, working for him as a character in this. And then the defense lawyer, who in the majority of the episode, she was kind of questioning the existence. She was not necessarily judging what was going on, but questioning what was going on.
Yeah.
She's now the one in charge of this courtroom scene as the judge.
Yeah.
And his father, who he had the question of, why is he haunting me? Why is he passing judgment on me? And now he's the jury foreman, which gives the guilty verdict. And the prison guard, who was, very mean and antagonistic to him, is now the district attorney, the prosecution that is working
Yeah.
towards his guilt.
Yeah, yeah. So we can assume that these are faces from his life that somehow correspond to these roles.
Mm-hmm.
I think in dreams I don't see faces very vividly. I think that, like, if it's the people who are my loved ones in my life, I know what they look like, and I see their face, not in any great detail. It's almost like it's just my awareness that it is their face is all the information my brain needs to kind of keep going with the dream. So I certainly don't find that faces come to me that clearly, you know. And if I haven't seen somebody in a while, I do find it hard to recall the exact detail of their face just by closing my eyes and imagining, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I do get, like, you know, awful moments of how the hell do I know this person, you know, and can't pin the face to the name or anything. So I think, you know, everything like that exists on a spectrum. Some people are just really good. As soon as they see the face, it just clicks with them and everything.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle, especially in terms of like movies and TV shows. That whenever I see like a character actor, I'll be like, I recognize that person, and then for me it's like 50-50. You know, sometimes I'll be like, oh yeah, they're this person that played in this role and this role, and then other times it's like, oh, I can't for the life of me think of where I know them from.
Yeah, and you'll just be sitting there like, oh, it's gonna kill me. I have to look it up. But what about in dreams? Do you see faces vividly in dreams? Do you think?
My big issue is, like I talked about before, my memory of my dreams is so nebulous that, you know, I remember having a dream, I would say on average, maybe 3 to 4 times a year. So it's extremely rare.
I think I'd be about the same now, but I had a much higher hit rate as a teenager and a child.
And in turn, like, I remember, like, I know that I have extremely vivid cinematic dreams, but at the same time, whenever I wake up, they just disappear.
It's all just Cheerios.
Quickly. Yes.
Yeah.
I can remember the mood. I can kind of remember the overall arc, but then trying to remember details or the flow of it is just completely impossible. Even if I take the time, where, you know, sometimes I will take that time, because I've read articles on, you know, ways to better remember your dreams, and I think the biggest one that sits with me is, if you want to take steps to remember your dream, whenever you wake up, don't open your eyes. Like, whenever you have the awareness that you're awake, keep your eyes closed and try to walk through your dream with your eyes closed, and that repetition helps build it within your memory. Because typically, as soon as your eyes open and then your mind starts getting the visual information from your surroundings, that overrides your dream memory.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely try that, because I've had a couple of experiences recently where I wake up in the middle of the night and I had been dreaming, but I just don't think of it. And then I get up and go to the toilet, or I just kind of walk around wondering if I will be able to get back to sleep or not, or whatever, and then go back to sleep. And go back to bed, and as soon as my head hits the pillow, the familiarity of the environment and the sensation of lying down brings the dream back to the forefront of my mind. But that's it's like you said, grasping smoke, you know, it's just gone. But as soon as it happens, I'm like, oh, I could have been thinking of this dream the whole time. But the dream, even the awareness that there was a dream, only hits me when I get back into the bed, and the familiar feeling of the bed just brings a sense of a dream. And what amazes me in those moments is your capacity to have a thought that is not relatable in any way. It's not intelligible. It's not because it's a memory of a recent experience, i.e., the dream. But there are no words. There's no strong image. There's a sense of some imageness about it. And the things I end up saying to myself, oh, I remember the dream. There was a sense in which I was separate from this thing that was going on that I was aware of. And that's like, you end up saying things like that and you're just like, what? Well, that's not a thing. That's not a thought. But
Like,
but
I
because
understand
there's
the words that I'm saying. I
Yeah.
understand the words individually, but then put
Yeah.
together, they don't make any sense.
Yeah, because I'm trying to pin words on something that has no business having words pinned on it, because it's just this feeling and it's this kind of context, and there's some vague spatial information as well as some vague emotional information. There's just like insufficient data, just like it doesn't work. And that's kind of, that's why it's so boring listening to people telling their dreams, because it's just insufficient data, But yeah, so, I mean, for this 85 version, by this time in it, I am kind of, I've come around to quite liking this version. I still, on balance, I think the 1961 version is a better piece of television, and it's just because it's got more flair to the production. The acting, although very much of its era, has dated a bit better in the. I kind of have this thing about acting that, like, whenever we look at older TV shows and or movies and whatever, it's like, wow, how did people kind of put up with that acting, and it's so kind of stilted and unnatural and stuff. But like, we only think that the acting that we watch nowadays is natural because we're surrounded by it. If you take your favorite drama that you think of at the pinnacle of acting, and you watch that, and you sometimes, if you mute, or sometimes if you just jump in on a scene and you haven't been brought into the TV show or the movie or whatever by setting the atmosphere, you're not in the world of it. Just watch it, and watch it in a coldly analytical way, and say to yourself, I'm going to try and believe that this is real and that that's not a person acting. You will realize how stylized our acting is that we're used to nowadays, And there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just that, like, acting is style. It has a fashion to it. It has there are trends that come and go, and
It's caricature.
It is caricature, and it's you're doing something with your face that shows. Sometimes the point is to show as little as possible because your character is hiding, and sometimes it's like the character can't help, let all of their thoughts. Sometimes now I'm talking about acting. I think I don't know if you watch Better Call Saul, but there's a particular actor, Ray Seahorn, the woman who plays Kim, I think is Saul's girlfriend in it. And she is just a phenomenal actor, and I could watch her all day. And she has this amazing ability to make all of her characters' inner thoughts flit across her face in a matter of moments. And you following her beat by beat. She is sometimes we stay on her while she's not talking, while she's just listening. And that way you get both sides of this conversation. You get all of her emotional responses, and she's just brilliant. And I mean, loads of great actors can do this, where they're telling you so much of the story with their face. And if you look at people's faces in real life, they don't do nearly as much work as that. I mean, I'm sure some people do, but it's not about realism. It's about communicating ideas and telling a story. And so yeah, how did I get onto acting? Yeah, because I think the acting, there are definite moments in this 1961 version where I think the acting is a little bit ropey, and they could have taken a few more takes, especially anytime somebody's laughing, and the maniacal laughing that the main character doesn't really come off, and it's a bit cringy in some of them. But then there's some bits where he's like, when he's relating the story of the electrocution and the execution and how he's been through it all these different times, he's like, his throat starts getting dry, and you can hear him swallow, and you see the kind of sweat on him, and it's so engrossing. It's so compelling to watch, and I don't think the 80s version has those heights. It's TV acting, which is like it's a notch above, and this is a very, very important distinction. I'm not saying these are bad actors. I'm saying this acting style, which is to do with the production schedule as much as it is to do with who's the director on the day, you know, because it's like you don't have time to just have 50 takes and have all this different. So what you have is style and style choices. And I'm reading the script. I know what I'm going to do with this. And I just prefer the style that they used in the 60s to the style that they used in the 80s. But then from a writing point of view, I think that most of the additions and changes were added depth to the story, and I really came to appreciate the 80s one.
Yeah, I really think that whenever you're comparing these two versions, that the 60s version has better cinematography, better visual style, and the 80s version has better writing. Yeah,
I think so. And I think apart from a couple of changes that I think, I think they made the premise way too distinct in the opening bit before the narration, and there was that was the one choice I kind of didn't like from the writing point of view. And then from there on, I think they made some really interesting choices. But that brings me to this point that I kind of think you and Alice were talking about, and Alice made the point that like watching them back to back like this, you can kind of convince yourself that it's not a remake, it's a sequel. That's not that they weren't her exact words, but that you can imagine that he's just been dreaming about this the whole time, and he's having this recurring. And I was just like, as soon as I heard that, I was just like, yes, and let's do this, because the obvious conclusion then to that is that if they are both canon, that we then, the obvious next step is to let's talk to Jordan Peele. I don't know if there's a plan to do a season 3 of new. They've canceled it, have they?
Yeah, well, I mean the official statement is that they feel like they don't have any more stories to tell. So
okay, well, I've got one for them.
Because they say that it wasn't so much that that Paramount Plus canceled them because of ratings or budget or anything, but the Jordan Peele and his fellow showrunners, they made the decision themselves to not make a third season.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's usually the way things are on in like British TV, and Americans are all like, why did that show stop? And it's like, well, they stopped. They were finished making it, so they stopped making it. It's like, what? That can't happen. You keep getting renewed. You keep making the show, and that's just it's a cultural difference, and the commercial model is different, and there's more money in the American system. So if people are watching The Office is going to keep getting made up to 9 seasons, whether the main character Michael Scott is in it anymore. That's just kind of what happens, and I mean I much prefer the way it's done in the UK, of like, because you're less likely to be flogging a dead horse. So it's just unusual to hear that.
Even though the UK still has Red Dwarf.
Yeah. Oh wow, Red Dwarf. Do we have time to start talking about Red? Oh wow, Red Dwarf is that is like Rob Grant and Doug Naylor. Doug Naylor just can't stop making that show, and he can't stop thinking in those worlds. I will say, like, I did a whole deep dive on Red Dwarf a couple of years ago, caught up. I couldn't believe they were still making it. I had been out of touch with it for years, and I will say that although the new episodes aren't amazing, they are far better than they have any business being. They're almost funny in places, and they're almost interesting in places.
Red Dwarf is a show that I caught just handfuls of random episodes on PBS whenever they were shown over here. And then whenever they started coming out with the DVDs, I started collecting the DVDs. And I have the first 5 seasons on DVD, which I've watched.
That's about right.
and I
That's
haven't.
exactly where to stop. Series 6 is okay. It's just very formulaic and it's very much the same. There's some very good stuff in it, but then that's when it really finished after season 6, series 6, and then series 7 was like Rob Grant didn't come back and Doug Naylor did, and 7 and 8 are just awful. They're just unwatchable, and they brought Kachansky into it and just dross. Wow, how do we start talking about Red Dwarf? Anyway, I need to get back onto my main rant because I've been taken onto sub rants here. The main rant is like I started thinking about this last night of like what a third chapter in the Shadow Play trilogy would be, a third entry in the trilogy, and you would connect the previous two more than they already are, and you can have this guy going through, and of course you can do it longer. You would do it as like an hour-long slot, and you can have it that he's been having this dream again and again, and you can show like even clips and images from the first two, but you can also show like it hasn't just been like hanging and electric chair. It's been, gas chamber and like guillotine even, and show it as, as if he was back in the French Revolution or something, and that he's imagined it in all these different ways, and that there's been this rotating cast of characters. But what is kind of interesting about the first two, these versions that we're talking about today, being if the 85 one is a sequel, then that it adds a very interesting layer, because the whole thing we've been talking about, the way the 85 one is written, in that it adds wrinkles and it develops the idea more. Well, now that fits because this is a later iteration of the dream. And go back to what I was saying earlier about, I think he had this dream for years without any of the lucid dreaming aspect, and he just dreamt the whole thing over and over again. And then he became more and more aware. And so by the time we catch up with him in the 85 episode, he has started to recognize, oh yeah, my sister's always in it. My dad's always in it. My sister hates me. I feel guilty about something, and that must be the reason why. So these things he hadn't been aware of in the earlier iterations, he's becoming more and more aware of. And so that gives us this potential for the story where he can start, becoming more aware, and then start saying, well, now he has to, unlock whatever this secret is. He's guilty and he doesn't know why. So that brings you to maybe like a storyline about repressed memory. Now, repressed memory is kind of a tricky one because it was there's an oblique reference to it, I'm guilty and I don't know why, in this 85 version. And it was a fashionable idea in the 80s and 90s, but it's very much fallen out of favor. And there were some awful miscarriages of justice due to the myth of repressed memory. People being under hypnosis influenced into forming new memories and memories of abuse, and then somebody being convicted on the strength of that and stuff. It's awful. So maybe I'm not crazy about the idea of propagating the myth of repressed memory, but it fits so well that
there's a podcast that I listen to called Criminal.
Yes.
And they had an entire episode where they talked to someone who was basically given a false memory about child abuse, and where he created these false memories of abuse and actually convicted his it was either his biological father or his stepfather. And it wasn't
Is that the Friedmans case?
I don't remember.
There's a documentary capturing the Friedmans, and it's either that or a very similar case that you're talking about. Yeah,
but that situation happened.
The satanic panic, it was the same. Yeah,
where he was basically fed these false memories over a course of time, and when he was a child, so much so that they basically implanted these false memories to where he actively believed that they happened, even though they didn't.
Yeah, and it's a terrible thing, because not only are you falsely convicting somebody, but you're abusing this child by giving them these awful traumatic memories that never actually happened, and creating this enmity between the child and the parent. It's just like, and it's all from like what they call an excess of virtue. It's all from wanting so much to be the hero and find a case where you can protect a child and you can convict a wrongdoer. And cops do it by, grilling kids until they tell you what they want to hear. And psychologists do it and psychiatrists do it in the same way through hypnosis and suggestion. Some of the accounts are like, in retrospect, it's so obvious that it's suggestion, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, but I do like your idea of updating this with a part 3 where it escalates it. And I think that there's a couple different ways that you could potentially do it. One is to actually spend more time in his waking life, where he would be an older man and he is dealing with the his day-to-day life, where his life is kind of in shambles because he's had this recurring dream every single night for the entirety since he was a young man. And I would say that I would probably cast someone like maybe in his 50s 60s, so a slightly older person. And then the other thing that you could potentially do it is if you expand on the fact that this dream world actually is created every night, and the dream characters are becoming more and more self-aware as time goes on, and to where they are becoming more fully formed characters, and they are actively trying to keep him in the dream for longer, so that way they can exist for a longer period of time. Yeah, I think there's two interests. You could go either of those two ways, or both of them.
Yeah, and you could have him use the fact that the characters are more kind of realized now. You could have him use that to get his day of execution, and maybe even start to kind of do something, therapeutic within the dream, and creating something, it'd be interesting to have versions of the dream where he starts to have these moments of calm and freedom, and then down comes a cop comes and arrests him again and takes him, rips him out of that pleasurable moment and into something, back into you thought you could evade justice and you will be, sentenced, and back to the courtroom, and then of course the ending, or the only way he can break the loop is to unlock this.
I think there's two good. I think there's two potential good endings for this. Go ahead and say yours first.
Well, I'm thinking the only way. My only problem with the ending I came up with was that it might not be Twilight Zone-y enough because there's too much kind of resolution. But basically, it unfolds what the problem was. My sister hates me. I don't know why. Who knows what goes on between brothers and sisters? I'm guilty and I don't know why. And the father keeps. So I think the father was abusing the sister, and he was the big brother, and he failed to protect his sister, and he's racked with guilt. And people carry shit like that for their entire lives, So that's my kind of, that was I was kind of started pitching it to my wife last night because I was started to, and she said, she was like, oh, she figured it out as I was saying it. And I was like, what? And I was like, oh, she said, oh, I thought you were going to say the dad was abusing the sister. And I was like, oh yeah, that'll do. Yeah, I'll have that. Because it just fits. And you could obviously go different ways, but that's what I had. And then that he would kind of resolve it in the dream and get his day of execution. And you would have to create a bit of a plot there to relate those two a bit more. And that then he wakes up, and of course there's this awful freedom, so he wakes up and he's free of the dream now, and he just knows in his guts that he's not going to have it again. But now he has this awful realization of what has gone on in his family, and we just pull out as he's crying in bed and alone with this awful truth,
Yeah, I think the other
Go on.
direction to go, and I think it would be good to have like the longer format, and then you could have repetitions of the dream as well. Like show the
Totally.
entire dream like maybe 3 or 4 times over the course of the episode. But
Yeah.
I like the idea of, like I was saying, that these dream characters are becoming more and more realized and more real, and it would end with him getting that stay of execution and him continuing to like maybe even get freed within the dream world, and then whenever it cuts to back to the real world, he's passed away, and so he exists
Wow. Yeah.
in this dream world that he's created has
Yeah.
become his afterlife.
Yeah, or you could pull out and he's in a coma.
Yeah.
Maybe he was in a coma the whole time, and this was why he kept dreaming, because he was he never did wake up, and that's why it never showed the waking life in the previous episodes. there are lots of different things you could do with it.
Yeah.
But I kind of, as soon as Alice said it in the previous episode, I was like, why didn't I think of that? The repetition is built into the story. So of course you can say that they are one story, that the remake is a sequel. Yeah. And then that of course points to the next chapter. Yeah.
Yeah. And one other thing that I did, because I was curious, is I did do my 5 minutes of research, 5 minutes of Google research on the actual history of hangings in the United States since.
Oh yeah, I meant to look this up as well. Yeah.
And so hangings did exist in the U.S. and it did kind of exist to a certain extent in the course of 85, but they weren't actively being done. It was just they existed as a possibility, but
In the law.
yeah, but the last public hanging actually occurred back in 1936.
Wow.
Rainey Bethia was hanged after he was convicted of rape, and over 20,000 people came to Owensboro, Kentucky, which was where it was held. And I include that because I actually spent a year, my first time after I left home and moved to my first job, I spent a year living in Owensboro, Kentucky, so I thought that was interesting.
Wow.
And then they actually, they stopped them, but after 1965, there was only 3 more hangings, and all 3 of them occurred between 1993 and 1996.
No way. So there
Yeah.
was a little hanging resurgence.
Yeah, and in all of those
after this episode.
cases, I believe they happen in states where there was the choice between lethal injection or hanging, and the prisoners actually actively chose hanging over the lethal injection.
I think I would too. Lethal injection is meant to be, the more research that comes out about it and the more that's understood, is meant to be like an absolutely terrible way to die.
Yeah,
Your blood starts burning from the inside, basically.
It's been a while since I looked it up, but I do remember a bit of that, because the explanation is, it's just like going to sleep, but then the more study that they do, it's like, you're paralyzed first.
Yes.
And so you're basically still conscious.
Yeah. And you can't scream when, so it looks painless from the outside. But of course that is the sum total of it's humane treatment theater. It's not about humane treatment. If it was about humane treatment, you wouldn't be killing people. It's like, it's entirely theater to show, well, look, we're doing it in a respectful, formal way. I've always thought as well that like our stories kind of always celebrate somebody facing their death with dignity. But really, I think that just serves the status quo. It serves the powers that be, because if you don't cause a fuss and you're basically just making it easy on your murderers, if I were ever sentenced to death, I would just like absolutely kick and scream, and I would just like shout, please don't kill me, please don't kill me. dear God, I want to live. You know what I mean? I would just like make it as unpleasant for these the people carrying it out as possible, because it is just like this sanitization of it, and this kind of like the appearance of the veneer of respectability that it's given by these formal processes are just like, they just compound the barbarity of it.
But I think that's about all I have for this episode. You know, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you and going on all these tangents and rants.
Excellent.
I've really enjoyed it.
I get a sense you don't want to get too much into the politics of the death penalty.
Yeah, I'm happy to stick with, you know, the sci-fi.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
the unreality of dream characters
Well,
actually
of course,
existing.
Yeah, but of course Rod Serling was famous for working political messages into his into the Twilight Zone. You know, that was like he did more social commentary through analogy and metaphor in than most other shows were doing, even when they, supposedly dealt with the issues at the time, because media was, there's no abject censorship, but there was a lot of, media was very conservative, and there was a lot you couldn't say. Yeah.
But yeah, again, thanks so much for talking with me, and
you're so welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
You got one more chance to tell everybody where they can find you online.
Come on over to malkovichminute.net, and any whatever social platform you use, you will find a link to it there, and you'll find the as of recording the 25 released episodes that we've done. So if you want to catch up, there'll be plenty more coming in the new year. I suggest that you can watch the movie again. It's available on Criterion Edition Blu-ray. It's available if you're in the UK and Ireland market. It's available on Eureka, I think, and there's a great Blu-ray of it over here as well. If you want to be newfangled about it and watch it streaming. Where did you say
I believe
streaming?
it's currently on Peacock right now.
It's on Peacock. Okay, the NBC one. Great. So that's NBC Universal. It is a Universal Pictures release, so that makes sense. It's a great movie, well worth watch, and you can follow along. So Bubbawheat, thank you very much for having me, and I'll see you when I see you. I'll have you over Malkovich Way someday soon.
All right, sounds good. And as always, I am Bubbawheat. You can find me at flightstights@movienights.com. You can find me on Twitter at Bubbawheat, and you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. And we also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group. Go ahead and join that and have discussions on each episode as they come out, as well as any sort of discussion or memes about time loops in general. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, I would appreciate it if you go into that and leave us a rating or a review to help increase our presence. I'd greatly appreciate it. So until next time, I will still be here, trapped in the Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Light for your approval.
Another dimension.
Light for your
Shadow. Another dimension.
Light for your
Shadow. Another dimension. Self.
Light for your
Shadow. Another Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone. It's something else that holds Adam Grant in the hot, sweaty grip of fear. Something worse than any punishment this world has to offer. Something found only in the Twilight Zone.